You've been waiting all week for that Saturday show. Tune in, see what happened, let your troubles go. Work real hard, now it's time to take it slow. Kick back and relax with that Saturday show.
Good morning, Albuquerque, and welcome to another episode of That Saturday Show, a program of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. We have a great show for you today with our friend Steve Cabiedas joining Tom and me for a riveting discussion about all kinds of exciting things, but particularly about voting rights. And we're going to be joined by a dynamic panel to talk about nuclear waste disposal, and all kinds of issues regarding nuclear weapons, and they've got a lot to say. But first, let me get this off my chest. August 28th marks the date for the next March on Washington, and oh, how we need this march. 60 years ago, people gathered around the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Monument to call for voting rights and equal rights across the broad spectrum of otherwise elusive entitlements. Well, here we are again, marching for the same things as we witness elected officials and their crazed minions working this time to roll back the meager but important gains we have made. This time, after the right to vote was secured, or so we thought, Republicans, that's what I call them, in Congress and their state houses around the country, feeling both threatened and emboldened by the neo-Nazis who just marched in Philadelphia and the hordes of insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol in January, they're taking bold steps to guarantee that people of color in particular no longer have the right to vote. Sounds extreme? Yes, but it's true. This time, right-wing evangelical so-called Christians are gathering there in their mega churches like Legacy and Calvary here in Albuquerque, preaching a gospel of hatred and deceit and fascist principles that will only bring suffering and disenfranchisement. This time, the true believers of triculturalism, which ignores the very presence of black people in New Mexico, have joined forces with those who would oppose critical race theory and instead seek to erase the truth about the nation's ugly past and present. This time, the police are pushing back against our demands for reordering how they do their business and pushing back against our demands to not only stop the persecution of black and brown men and women, but our demands for holding them accountable for their actions. We're being denied a voice because our voices call for changes. We're being denied a voice because when we vote, good things happen. Necessary things happen. Realms of possibility for a better life come closer to reality. When we vote without obstacles being placed in our paths, fascists and racists lose. We have to push back. We have to fight back against this onslaught of racist and fascist suppression that is rising up against us. We have to win. And win means taking every means necessary at our disposal. Not to win means hope dies. Not to win means that democracy will still hold some promise for us all. But it could die as well. Failure is not an option. I'm Jim Harvey, and I just had to get that off my chest. All right, it's time for Hassani bringing us good news. Kick it, Hassani.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'm Gugu for Good News. The goal of this segment is to inspire and uplift you, the viewer, with nothing but good news. Let's jump right in, shall we? Our first story reads like this. Scrappy 81-year-old woman completes her second Tough Mudder race. Now, what's your excuse? Let's dig a little bit further, shall we? Mildred Wilson from Missouri crossed the finish line of a Tough Mudder 5K obstacle course. This was Wilson's second time completing the Tough Mudder 5K. The race is famous for immediately requiring participants to army crawl through pits of muddy water before tackling a several-mile run with obstacles. Mildred had to get the thumbs up from her doctor first and then begin training at the YMCA. And boy, it paid off big time, as she would crush every obstacle in her path, while she remarked, mind you, "The Missouri course was a little easier than expected." You go, Mildred. Wilson's husband, Farrell, supported her the whole time and cheered her across the finish line in 2019 before he passed the next year. It was in his honor that she crossed the line once again in 2021. Now, when was the last time you did something for the first time? Isn't that good news? Congratulations, Mildred. Now, I remember meeting a track and field athlete that commonly choked whenever he ran too fast. Too bad it became a running gag for him. Moving right along, shall we? Google flies in to help Girl Scouts with Girl Scout cookie sales shortfall. In early April, Girl Scouts were experiencing a 50% shortfall in cookie sales, with reduced foot traffic and the pandemic limiting their ability to sell cookies in person. Google's delivery service Wing began talking to the Girl Scout troop in Christiansburg, Virginia. Now, enthusiasm and sales are soaring, with the local scouts selling cookies in an entirely new way, by drone. Residents now can get Samoas, Thin Mints, peanut butter patties, and more favorites flown through the sky and dropped directly at their front door. And through it all, Wing has also been working with the Girl Scout troop, showing them the technology of how drones work, and hopefully inspiring the girls to pursue STEM careers. STEM is short for science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, during 2020, Wing was able to support a number of local businesses with their contactless delivery capabilities. For example, the owner of Mockingbird Cafe Bakery reported that the drone delivery accounted for 25% of their sales during the early days of COVID pandemic. Google Wing has committed to helping the girls sell over 3,000 cookies regardless. So far, the most popular cookie order, not surprising, are Thin Mints. If this means getting your Thin Mints dropped into your front yard, it's a badge that's worthy of a Girl Scout stash. Now, isn't that good news? The problem for me with Girl Scout cookies is no matter how many I eat, I always want Samoa. Okay, I'll stop. I'll leave the jokes to Little Big Mama. Actually, let's check in on our favorite sassy grandmother. Little Big Mama, what do you have in store for us, lady?
Thank you, Hassani. Well, I got a question for your viewers today. Where do you take someone who's been hurt in a peekaboo accident? The ICU. Well, here's a quick story about my daddy. Bless his heart. Well, 2 years after my mother passed, my father, Jack, went to the doctor for a physical. And a few days later, the doctor saw my father, Jack, walking down the street with a young woman on his arm. A couple of days later, the doctor spoke to my dad and said, "Mr. Daniels, you really are doing good, aren't you?" My father replied,
"Just doing what you said, Doc. Get a hot mama and be cheerful."
The doctor said, "That's not what I said. I said you have a heart murmur. Be careful." Bye, baby.
The best way to turn a frown upside down is to get goo-goo for good news. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Alujimi. We'll see you right here again next time on That Saturday Show with Little Big Mama, of course. Take care. Bye.
Nuclear waste, nuclear weapons, nuclear disposal, weapons of mass destruction. Those are the topics we're going to be talking about now, and I have the pleasure of being joined by three of the hardest working people that I know in Albuquerque working against these dangerous issues that threaten our planet. I'm joined by the wonderful and exciting Sally-Alice Thompson. Yeah. And next to Sally-Alice is the incredible Charles Powell, my homeboy. And next to Charles is Marcy Matasik. Got that right? You did? Yes! Incredible folks who represent End War and Occupations Action Team. Welcome, you guys. Glad to have you on That Saturday Show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Sally-Alice, let's start out by talking with you. Tell us a little bit about what's got you going this time.
Well, I have been anti-nuclear since a short time after the dropping of the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Yes.
I was alive at that time, which a lot of people that are living now weren't.
That's right.
But I remember the jubilation that United States engaged in, and I'm sorry to say I engaged in it too, but eventually I learned how bad it was, and how very, very how we had been involved in such a horrible, horrible thing. That's the only time that nuclear bombs have been dropped by our country, and so eventually we got a United Nations treaty called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the major thing that it says is that eventually we will get rid of nuclear bombs.
Well, we'll see where that's got us.
Eventually doesn't seem to ever come. It's
That's
like
right.
tomorrow. Right. And so instead of cutting back on our nuclear weapons supply, we keep adding. We have the Orwellian concept that more means less. If we keep making more bombs, eventually we won't have any. That doesn't make sense to me.
No.
But from an Orwellian point of view, I guess it does make sense. But right now, what is happening is that our country has set aside $7 trillion for manufacture of more bombs, and we already have more than we need. There's one thing that I want to say about that. We need to get rid of them.
That's right.
And so the United Nations came up with another treaty called I can't think of, I'm very slow, the UN Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Mm-hmm. And that treaty calls for the complete ban of nuclear weapons. And of course, we have the problem here that we have them, and even if we did sign that treaty, which we haven't, what would we do with the ones we already have? And I have a dream that we would change our priorities and hire the brilliant scientists of this country and every country in the world to collaborate to find ways to get rid of nuclear weapons, because they're very, very dangerous, and you can't just flush them down the toilet or bury them, because
Exactly.
they're dangerous no matter where they are. And so if our country showed real leadership, we would take the lead in starting studies to get rid of the nuclear weapons that exist instead of making new ones.
You're absolutely right. Charles?
Jim, the hope for getting rid of all these weapons, the ones we have, the ones that are being produced, the future plans for building more, is to have a public uprising. So that's why I'm so thankful that you have us on your show to address the public and try to get them involved in stopping the nonsense. We don't need more of these weapons, but the plan is to produce more, and Los Alamos is where the plans are going. They've already started the building. It's a massive expansion at Los Alamos to produce more of these weapons. And of course, now they have a space force, so they're planning to put nuclear weapons in space. So I'm a veteran for peace, and that hasn't always been. I served in the Air Force from 61 to 65. I served on a Titan ICBM missile crew, and I was prepared to help launch nuclear weapons. I cringe now to think that I never once hesitated about what I was trained to do and what I was willing to do. And there were times that we weren't thinking if we get the order, we were thinking when. We expected the order. We waited for the order to launch nuclear weapons, and we knew it would end the way our life on Earth would end the way we know it. But yet I was willing to do it. But now I'm committed to try to stop the nonsense. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak my mind.
Absolutely. And before I go to you, Marcy, let me just editorialize a little bit. You know, back to your comments, Sally-Alice. You know, in 1968, I attended the 23rd annual A&H Bomb Disaster Conference in Japan. And I had the opportunity to visit some of the hospitals and the museums and talk to victims of the A&H bomb disasters from World War II that were still there, still languishing and suffering from the devastation. And I can tell you, if anybody has any doubt about the human devastation alone of A&H bombs, they need to go to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and check for themselves, and they may change their attitudes about nuclear bombs. And mind you, the bombs that were dropped in Japan back in World War II are nothing compared to what these monsters are creating these days. You know, the potential for devastation is just even greater, and it just has to stop. Marcy, what say you?
Absolutely. The bombs that they are producing these days, and our nuclear weapons on average, are 20 times more powerful than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. Mm-hmm. Just let that sink in for a minute. And the United States has about 6,000 of them. That's enough destructive power to cause 100,000 Hiroshimas, thereabouts.
Wow.
All we need is to drop a few of them, and life on Earth won't be livable, because it will blacken the skies. It will change the climate. It will change everything on the globe, and every living being is going to suffer from radiation. So if we start a war, I mean, who would want to start such a war? The people who want to drop weapons of mass murder must be mass murderers. Nobody else would want to drop such a bomb.
Exactly.
Right? And what most people don't know, what many people in this area do not realize, is that we're in danger because of what they're doing at Los Alamos right now. The National Nuclear Security Administration, under the DOE, the NNSA they're called, is building this new bomb factory that Charles referred to. They're expanding their operations. Now, they've been building an occasional bomb just to keep in practice, because it's not something you can write in a manual. It's something that you have to do hands-on to turn plutonium into a bomb. But they're going to, the National Nuclear Security Administration wants to build 30 of these bombs that are 20 times the strength of the Hiroshima bomb per year by 2026.
Good grief.
Every year. And then by 2030, they expect to be producing about 80 to 100 new bombs per year. And they're getting this all rolling without a plan for what to do with all the waste. Plutonium, radioactive plutonium, is extremely hazardous. There is no safe level of exposure. And yet, they're building this bomb factory at Los Alamos, right in the middle of the Pajarito Fault. It's an earthquake fault.
That's right.
They get light, smaller earthquakes regularly, frequently there. And the U.S. Geological Survey has said that there is a 100% chance that there will be a major earthquake there. And if there's a major earthquake, all of that radioactive plutonium is going to affect all of us. Now, they don't know when this could happen, just like the Hurricane Center can't really predict when the next hurricane is going to be with any accuracy. But there will be such an earthquake. At the same time, the National Nuclear Security Administration refuses to do an updated environmental study. They did a study about 13 years ago for a smaller project that had nothing to do with building all these nukes. And they think that is adequate. And they have said so, that they will not do a new environmental study. So they are not complying with the environmental, the National Environmental Policy Act. I always get it wrong. I had to look at my notes. The NEPA Act. So they're building this in noncompliance with NEPA, without an environmental study, and risking all of our lives. We need to be speaking out. People need to be telling our administration to stop. Our Congress people have not been very sympathetic. As a matter of fact, our senators and a couple of our representatives made sure that this would happen, and all of these billions of dollars were going to come to New Mexico. And the way that they did that was through the Defense Authorization Bill last year. Now, this is not publicized. Nobody knows it. You have to look for this stuff. Last year's Defense Authorization Bill was going to, they had provisions for nuclear weapons building at both Los Alamos and at Savannah River, South Carolina. And they were going to do about half here and about half there. Well, our senators and our congresspeople colluded to put a provision into the Defense Authorization Bill that cut the budget for Savannah River. And it sounded great. It's like, great, oh, they're going to cut nuclear weapons budget. No, they're going to make sure it all happens
all
here.
Here at Los Alamos.
All of it here. So it's extremely dangerous. It's a very, very bad idea to put it there, to build it at all. we already have too many. We don't need more. And they're saying that we need to modernize. It's the nuclear weapons modernization program that they are pumping. Our president, Biden, who actually said some things against nukes before, during the campaign before he was elected, and seemed to be inclined to want to reduce our arsenal, has now asked for $5 billion more money for this year to go to Lanel to hurry up this process.
Just for this year alone.
Yeah, they were planning on $2 billion a year for this new bomb factory. He just wanted to up it. Now that hasn't been passed yet, but that's what he's asking for. He must be listening to defense contractors. He must be listening to war profiteers and not the people.
Well, you always say if you follow the money, you'll find destruction at the end of every trail, and this is clearly no exception. Sally-Alice, I wanted to, if you would speak to the hypocrisy of all of this.
Well, that's just what I was thinking about.
The fact that the United Nations has 2 treaties out, and the United States has ignored both of them, but at the same time is telling other countries that they can't build nuclear weapons when the United States is building more. Speak to that.
First of all, we are members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But of course we have the eventual elimination
Yes.
to use. But then, as far as the new treaty to ban nuclear weapons, we have not signed that. It became law in January when the 51st nation signed it, but our nation has not signed it, and neither have China, Russia, or any of the
big
countries that have nuclear weapons. But the leaders of the 3 big countries, China, Russia, and the United States, have said explicitly that a nuclear war cannot be won, therefore it should not be fought. But the idea that we can have all those nuclear weapons and have crazy people like Donald Trump and people like that having access to them, it's worse than hypocritical. It's insanity, purely and
it's
simply.
frightening, isn't it?
And we've been very lucky that we have gone this far without a nuclear accident. We were just within seconds of being in one back. I've forgotten what year it was, but the crew of a Russian ship was given orders to launch a missile, a nuclear missile, but the captain of the ship said, "No, I don't think that. I think that's a mistake," and he refused to launch it, and it was a mistake.
It was.
So we owe the captain of a Russian ship for the safety of the planet.
Go figure. Go figure. I mean, that's an incredible fact all by itself. We've got about a minute left, and I wanted to just beam in a little bit on nuclear waste dumping. What's happening there?
I don't think we're prepared to talk about that, but I did want to say that our last hope is President Biden, who needs to listen to the people. And what we need is everyone listening and to tell everyone you know to write to President Biden at the White House comment line. And if you will go to my petition on change.org, no new nukes, just go to,
Wonderful.
if you can go there, it's just no-new-nukes, change.org. It gives you the link to the White House comment line. It gives a summary of what the problem is and a link to the comment page where you can tell President Biden, no more nukes.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for
Thank you.
sharing with us.
Let me say one more thing.
Real quick,
We
Sally-Alice.
need to put pressure on our government to sign the treaty to ban nuclear weapons. That's the only way we're going to ever get rid of them.
I couldn't agree with you more. This is a subject that calls for loads and loads of direct action if the planet is going to survive. Sally-Alice, Charles, Marcy, thank you both. Let's hear it for Dee Brown.
Black man, in and out of trouble. Just behind your eyes, I see what lies beneath the rubble. Rain will shine you rise, I hear the cries of generations wishing time would somehow start again and wash away this struggle. Man, big man, you can't be a kid. Spend your life to recompense for things your daddy did. Funny they ignore your years and try to call you boy till that sentence fall. Now you're a man, your latter years destroyed. From the start they break your heart, tell you your history starts to change. The patriarch departs, wore out his heart, waiting on the change. It's like the charge the teacher say you smart. Your life won't go the same, things fall apart. Ain't it such a shame that you're the one to blame? I can't get over how a story ended. Sarking home, my brother Trayvon had his life upended. Was just a kid in different skin, he gets his rights defended. But now the killer's still at large and won't be apprehended. And then I see my nephew James, he looks me in my eyes. He's only 16, just the same as if he's 25. His life to me is worth whatever I can sacrifice. I'd risk my own to save the tears his mom and mine would surely cry, but still the sum if he got slaughtered in the streets alone. The blame belonging to the shooter, somehow he would own. Guess he should have known not to be 16, black and looking grown. Walking home with headphones on, do-rag on, pants too long, talking on the phone. But I know it's rare to catch a black man cry. It's kinda hard to see a black man. I know it's hard to watch a black man cry. Black man cry. Don't hold your breath to see that black man's cry. He's much too hard to let the tears fall from his eyes. Used to be hard to make a black man cry. But here we are. Now there's a fire in the streets, guns for hire and police, brick and mortar burning down to muck and mire under feet. You're sowing and you reap, but if your retribution ain't discreet, you can wind up just another body on the concrete. Cold street, bittersweet, no rest for the weary. I ain't really lost my faith, but my outlook is dreary. Feeling like I'll take a stand, but subconscious is leery. Need the truth to find the answers, but I can't trust Siri. I need a break from stressing and microaggressions. I get mad, I'm confessing that I need to get my rest and try to wake up feeling happy and go smile for the people, making sure they feeling comfy. And tomorrow little sequel, I think about our girls, so innocent and sweet, but it can fade when they gotta learn to navigate the streets. All this pressure to be perfect and to fit into a culture that's full of vultures. Stay off the pole or have you seen me posters? Must find a way, but often scolded by the likes of Tommy Lauren and Ann Coulter. How she ever supposed to make it over? She gotta choose to lash out and speak vulgar, or push it down until it calls her ulcer. She can feel the cold world getting colder, but the heat's still on. What you thought it was gone? You thought a black press meant that racism was dead? Every time I see a black girl body slammed to the ground, it's my daughter I see grown men tossing around. Then you see a black man cry. It's kinda hard to see a black man. I know it's hard to watch a black man cry. Black man cry. Don't hold your breath to see that black man's cry. It's much too hard to let the tears fall from his eyes. Used to be hard to make a black man cry. But here we are. Here we are.
Great music, great music. Just want to remind you again that last interview we did, here is that important address. change.org/no-new-nukes. We need your voice. We're joined now by our director, Tom Dent, and our good friend of the show, Steve Caviedes, and thank you both for being here. We've got another hot topic that we want to cover today.
Thank you, Jim.
Tom?
Thanks, Jim. Hot topic, yeah, it was like you were saying in your introduction, there seems to be a parallel with a small group of white supremacists throughout the country to, I don't know, it's crazy. You know, if you look at all these state legislatures around the country, there's about, 32 to 42 state legislatures that have Republican-controlled legislatures that are trying to put forth all these voting right acts to stymie votes, specifically with people of color, yeah, it's crazy. It's, you know, with McConnell and the filibuster blocking everything, blocking the Voting Rights Act in Congress and stuff like that. They're gearing up to try to control the Senate and as much as they can in the next election that's coming up in 22. So we have to wake up. We can't fall asleep just because Biden was elected president and stuff like that. The work doesn't end. It's kind of like what happened in Georgia when, what was his name? The Secretary of State stole the election from Stacey Abrams.
Oh, Raffensperger.
No, is he the governor right now?
No, when you're talking about when old, what's his name, Bruce?
Kemp.
Bruce, yeah.
Yeah, Raffensperger kind of rigged the election for Kemp.
For Kemp.
They're trying to rig a lot of these things across the board, and they're working overtime in Georgia to set up a national voting rights act and law, and of course we're hit by the filibuster and all that, and we've got to wake up. We've got to do the March on Washington. We've got to get to all these crazy states like Arizona, Georgia. What did I hear today that states like Montana, possibly Nevada, and all the crazy stuff that happens in Oklahoma are working overtime to mess up the votes and make it more difficult, especially for Native Americans. And it's a crazy little cadre of white supremacists that are trying to stymie the vote, especially for people of color.
And you would think that these idiots, if they had any programs, if they had any platforms, they'd have nothing to be afraid of. But they don't. All they have is racism and fascism and greed, and that's all they're interested in. Steve?
Well, yeah, and so to back up what Tom was just talking about is that the latest court decision from the SCOTUS that came down on the 63 vote on the Arizona election reform law, basically upholding it and saying that the restrictions, the new restrictions that were put in are not onerous, that they're not actually going to dissuade things too much, or they're not particularly prejudiced in any certain way. One of the themes in the Arizona, Georgia, Texas attempts, Montana, and other states, they all are kind of a variation on a theme, but one of the biggest central point that they're trying to do is make it harder to conduct absentee voting. And a little bit on the early voting, but the big deal they've focused on is trying to not allow people to, once the ballot has been completed by the voter, to like deliver that to a mailbox or a polling site or the things like that, efforts that were done in previous elections. And then there's some extra special touches in different states like Georgia where they try to make it illegal to give water or food to people waiting in line to vote on election day, or even in early voting, things like that. So, but I noticed one of the biggest themes was the attempt to suppress the early and absentee vote.
It's just vicious.
Yeah, and there is, so yes, Tom.
And it's very prejudiced against the disabled as well, of course.
Right. So there's and it just the overall theme of trying to stop something from happening, and yet they love to talk about how, especially the Republicans love to talk about how they're for freedom and liberty, and yet they're trying to stop and suppress this action. And I think that you can tell a lot from any group, any political group, when you see whatever it is that they're trying to stop. So in the case of the Republicans, for decades, it's been voter registration suppression, early and absentee vote suppression. Well, absentee's new. That used to be the bailiwick of the Republicans.
That's right.
I remember elections here in the 90s when Democrats would win election day and lose the race when the absentee came in.
Exactly.
But now I guess it's different. And so this kind of constant gaming of the system is problematic, but it's apparent and obvious. So you see this. So, and in the case with the Republicans, yes, they try to get as few people to participate in the system as possible.
So we're looking at about 35% of the country, maybe, that stands to benefit from, possibly benefit from these voter suppression laws. But when you talk about the fact that absentee ballots are included in here, and they've been accustomed to taking advantage of that particular provision in voting, it could backfire and hurt them as well, we could hope.
And this is a plan that's been going on for a long time. When I was helping to run Central New Mexico Move to Amend back in 2012, we were warning people about Citizens United, Right to Work. We could see the ALEC state-by-state agenda happening. People have to put this together. I mean, it came from the Koch brothers, it came from the Tea Party, Americans for Prosperity, all these things that sounded like a good thing, and they just twisted it around. They had a very smart plan to get people on school boards, to occupy state legislators, to so they could have this majority, so they could put in these challenges now. And it's really strange if you look at this map, like 32 to 40 state legislatures that are Republican controlled. And it's almost the same map as COVID. You have the East Coast states, you have California, you have Colorado and New Mexico. It's almost the same as the legalization of marijuana in a way.
Right.
But, these senators were locked in a 50-50 lock in Congress. And look at the populations that they represent. California, New York, all these democratically controlled states, it's like 41 million more voters.
That's right.
And then you have all these little states with these tiny counties and stuff like that. And ALEC and the Koch brothers have been in those damn states, and they've supported those candidates. And you have Republican-controlled legislator from states that barely have any people, from counties that barely have any people, like Wyoming versus California,
right.
and that's how they work.
South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota,
North
Montana.
Dakota.
Yep.
Montana, hardly any population at all, and yet they wield as much power and authority in Congress, as these larger, more populated states.
Right. But,
Something's wrong with
here
that.
we are with a 50, I have to point out, and I will every single time during this Congress, we have a 50-50 Senate nominally by party with the tie-breaking Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris. And at the very beginning of this session, one thing that you always do after the election, the next session, is you write the rules for the next 2 years. And they could have written the rules to getting rid of the 60-vote filibuster, supermajority. They had their opportunity. They knew it was going to happen if they didn't do that, and they consciously chose not to do that. And as a result, we're here. So, you know, and not only that, on the places where we do need a 50-50 on certain things, President Joe Manchin of West Virginia comes in and decides to rule with the Republicans, and Kristen Sinema from Arizona as well. And don't think that there aren't a couple other Democratic senators that would have, you know, are smiling in the background. That because if those two weren't there, they'd have to do it and would. And partly because of the Citizens United money. So even in the Democratic Party, all that money's flooded in, and where they've won under corporate money and have been told, well, you can be a Democrat, but not too Democratic. And so this is the problem we're in.
Yeah, there's a number of Democrats that have accepted lots of Koch brother money.
And what I see on the Democratic side, real quick, is where the Republicans actively seek to do voter suppression and voting suppression. The Democrats seek to do candidate suppression. They go in and try to knock people out of primaries, or they find a candidate that's progressive and problematic for them and flood the ballot with 20 other candidates, or they go in and play whack-a-mole and start incentivizing candidates to disappear, or giving tons of money to their favorite in the primary, even though they're not supposed to. And they go around suing third parties who actually try to get ballot status. So, you know, where, like I said again, where you see any group of people trying to stop something is where you know that there's probably something good
that's just waiting to happen.
Well, I don't want to start a local controversy, but if you look back at the replacement for Deb Haaland, you know, Antoinette Cedillo Lopez was leading the vote count decidedly, and then all of a sudden, for the final count, what's her name, Melanie Stansberg reverses those votes, and suddenly she is our congressperson.
She didn't reverse the votes, and Antoinette Cedillo Lopez did get more raw votes in the second round than in the first, but a supermajority of all the other candidates combined, their voters went to Melanie Stansberg, and to me, when I saw that lining up and seeing all the candidates and everything, it was a flashback to the 2020 primary and how they basically flooded the map of candidates from different backgrounds and associations to all combat Bernie Sanders from getting his large vote total, so he wouldn't get the convention delegates. It was the exact same playbook.
I shouldn't talk politics being associated with the Peace Center, but when I was on the SEC for the Democratic Party, you know, we never saw Michelle Lujan Grisham at any of our gatherings and stuff like that. And when the final vote came down, the nomination, all of a sudden she popped up on stage and she had a zillion votes, and she's our governor now.
Well, it really bothers me, though, that the way the Democratic Party functions, you know, at least here in this state, it's like a little private club. Just a handful of select people get to make these critical decisions about, you know, who the candidates are going to be. And I find that bothersome because the rank and file voter in this town needs to have a say-so in the decisions that are being made, and it doesn't happen.
I think that there's two ways for that to happen, which is one is having an active, vibrant primary process where people, you know, you allow, just let people on the ballot and run, you know. It's true, you may get a few candidates that are kind of weird or whatever. That's all right, that's democracy. It can be a little sloppy. You usually, even in a field of 10, will have 2 or 3 that kind of stand out from the pack. You don't have to be afraid that you have to hyper-manage the elections, you know. The people at large are usually pretty good at figuring some of this stuff out. And by the same token, in a state like ours and in others around the country where we really no longer have purple areas, it's either beet red or deep blue, that in those local areas for the smaller races, not like the statewide ones. We really only have one party.
That's it.
So if we want a two-party system, we need to allow rules so that other parties can flourish in those other like one to challenge the Reds and one to challenge the Blues, and where it would still be just a two race, you know. And so yeah, I mean, right now this voter suppression thing from the Republicans is in a full court press, and it's being backed by the SCOTUS. And like you said, I think that the only resolve that we have is that we as a people have to, like in this election situation, be just very educated about what's coming down. We have to be ready to suffer voting in a harder environment than it was. It's not impossible, but it means that we have to plan more, we have to prepare more, we have to be angry enough and defiant. I think we as human beings, one of the greatest things about being a human being is I've learned that the worst thing you can ever tell a human being is you're not allowed to do this.
Absolutely.
And it's like, oh yeah, really?
Yeah.
What? Just hold my beer. And so, you know, the first time I saw that was in 2012 in that presidential election. After Obama got elected in 2008, the Republicans went and began like going into overdrive on this stuff. And in some states like Ohio and others, they restricted polling places, everything. But the Obama campaign was really ready, and they trained a lot of their people to train them to go, look, you're going to be in line for 4 or 5 hours. Bring a lawn chair. Bring a sack lunch. Bring an umbrella. It might be raining a bit. I mean, you know, and I remember that election day, looking at pictures from around the country, and I saw long lines, but I also saw a lot of prepared people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be our life for a while until we sort of ungridlock this system.
Yeah.
And I could put in a quick plug for two different things. First, ranked choice voting. It's a pretty good idea. The other thing is communication. That's why opposing points of view and intelligent conversation, like you see right here on that Saturday show, are so important. And they have stymied our local communication in the past. They did it on purpose, especially in 2012, when they shut down, quote unquote, and tried to stymie voices from Occupy and other things with the Republican administration coming into the city and stuff like that. So, like and subscribe to that Saturday show, ABQ. Share it with your friends. Get it all over town, because you're not going to see this in the Albuquerque Journal or in the 3 major TV stations.
Oh, could I give you some good news?
Sure, give us some good news.
There are some little shreds of good news. So in Texas, there was a really bad voter bill that was trying to go through the state legislature, and the Democrats sort of played some games with the rules and basically like left the legislature, and it didn't allow for quorums or something like that, which also stops other business. But the bad news is that Texas is looking at having a special session to try to do their voter bill. The good news is that during the regular session, they did pass a Senate Bill 598 that said that voting machines must have audible paper voting trails to them.
Wow.
And it passed. It got signed and passed.
Amazing.
So there's that. In Georgia, with the bill that seems like the most restrictive, there's currently 8 lawsuits against that bill. I mean, I knew the day that the no giving water or pizza in line, that at least that. The DOJ has actually stepped in to be a member, a party on that lawsuit as well.
Right.
So, you know, there's a whole bunch of entities coming after it, and so that's, you know, I think that's good. Also, by the way, from anyone who knows anyone in Montana, I read the bill. It was like a 2-page bill, and it says that no pecuniary benefit for helping in a ballot process is allowed, meaning no one can ask or offer a pecuniary benefit, which usually means money.
Right.
So I think that if you help someone for free, you're still okay.
Yeah.
Someone should check that out.
Yeah, that's worth a challenge all by itself.
Or just do it for free.
Just do it. And that we might have another court case on our hands that way. But that's a good way to knock it down. That's absolutely right. So we've got about a minute left, and I know that in my opening remarks I talked about August 28th, the date for the March on Washington, and you know, we need to organize. And I doubt if there are very many people in Albuquerque in particular who don't know somebody that lives in another state that needs a nudge. to vote to get that John Lewis voting rights bill passed, to get HB 1 passed as well, but to protect our rights to vote. I think is just such a critical piece that we need to begin to call those relatives and friends in those other states, as well as remind, our congressional delegation here, including the nut job down in Las Cruces, that we're keeping an eye on her. We can't expect much from her, but we need to let people know we've got work to do. So, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Tom, thank you so much. This is not the end of this discussion, because this is not the end of the battle. Maybe it's just the beginning. And now, we're going to take you out with music from Twist and Shout, an incredible music group that covers the Beatles. We thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week on That Saturday Show.
She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. You think you lost your love? Well, it's already yesterday, yeah. It's who she's thinking of. She told me what to say, yeah. She said she loves you. Don't let her be bad. She loves you, and you know you should be glad. When you heard her song, she almost lost her mind. Now she says she knows you're not the hurting kind. She said she loves you, and don't let her be bad. She loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. You know it's up to you. I think it's only right. I think hurt you too. Apologize to her because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. She loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to That Saturday Show.